Would you kindly start that timer?
I hate you.
Why?
Would you kindly?
Oh, that's right, because we're talking about Bioshock today.
Yeah. Welcome to Story Mode, Co-Operatives.
Yeah, Story Mode, number 2.
Yeah. I'm kind of excited about this one, because we're doing Bioshock. And Bioshock, really fucked with me as far as being a video gamer. Because I think it's one of the first games I've ever played that kind of addresses the fact that you as a gamer are a slave to somebody else's will.
Sort of. No,
yeah.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily the first. Maybe the first that you played. Because I'm guessing you'd have been around, 15 or 16 when that came out? Maybe 17?
Was it not 2008?
No, I think it was 2006.
Oh, no, you're right. Yeah.
Because I played it in college.
Okay.
Sophomore, I think junior year of college. So to me, I was very nonplussed by the game. I was one of those people who picked it up. I was like, "What the hell is everyone talking about with this? This is kind of a very standard first-person shooter with a couple of decent story points." Okay. So for the last story mode, I noticed to myself controlling the conversation, much like I am right now. So I decided to give Ben the topic of choice this week. And he's chosen Bioshock and Objectivism, and we're going to talk about the themes of Bioshock.
Right.
Not the gameplay. If you want to listen about the gameplay of Bioshock,
there's 10,000 videos.
Yeah, there are a bunch of videos elsewhere.
Some of them great, and not to knock them, but there's a lot.
No, they all suck. Every single one of them.
Only watch us.
Even though that's not what we're talking about.
No, not at all.
But so I'm just here to prove Ben wrong, poke holes in his arguments.
By all means.
Be here to say things like, yeah, Bioshock was cool to you. I hated it. It was lame. Been there, done that.
Already went through that cycle. So...
Already been betrayed by the quest giver man. That was totally cliche.
So the biggest thing behind Bioshock is Objectivism. And this is all spouted out by Rapture's owner or creator, Andrew Ryan, who
Rapture being the underwater city of Bioshock.
Which does have one of the coolest reveals of the city when you finally get down there. I think that was
I do like the opening.
Yeah.
That was probably the best part of the whole game.
Yeah.
Is the opening, 5 minutes when you crash in a plane and get into the lighthouse.
Yeah.
Ride in this bathysphere.
Yeah. And then you see a whale.
Do you see a whale? I know you see a whale.
At one point, yes.
I know you see a whale in the DLC for the Infinite, the Burial at Sea.
Oh.
But I know there's a squid, a giant squid.
I'm pretty sure you also see a whale, but yeah, I remember the giant squid.
And I'm pretty sure you see Objectivism too.
Yes. So, Andrew Ryan also, if you look at his name, is an anagram for We Are Ayn Rand, who came up with the...
Really, we are?
Yeah, it's weird. Especially when you look at the concept of Objectivism.
I know it's very easy to try Andrew Ryan, Ayn Rand, or almost.
But if you take all the letters, it goes into We Are Ayn Rand.
I guess because you gotta.
And Objectivism is basically this idea of self-interest, not necessarily selfishness, because you're supposed to help your fellow man, but it doesn't go into the idea of communism. I mean, the whole opening of Andrew Ryan's explanation of there is no God, there's no communism here, because our wealth is not for everybody. We're all looking at self-interest, which is a really interesting concept as you play through the game, and as you look at it from the standpoint of the relationship between the gamer and the game.
Yeah, I want to go kind of real quickly and do a sort of a Bioshock summary for those of you who have not played the game, or it's been a long time. So, for those of you who don't know, the Bioshock opens with you plummeting into the sea on an airplane. You emerge, and there's a lighthouse. You walk up to the lighthouse, and you go into this underground... Well, it's underwater. It launches you underwater, and you have to find this underwater city called Rapture. It's ruled by this guy named Ayn Rand. Andrew Ryan. We are Ayn Rand. And, and there's some other plot points going on in there, but I feel like that's kind of the major stuff. Underwater city ruled by this guy who's at least they never use objectivism in the way he talks about his own philosophy.
Never addressed. Yeah.
But
I mean, Ayn Rand's name is never even mentioned.
No, it's sort of almost like he'd be the Ayn Rand of this universe. And yeah, for those of you who may not, Rapture is supposed to be sort of an analog to the Galt's Gulch from Atlas Shrugged. This sort of hidden away city where all the entrepreneurs and people providers are going to make their stuff and retreating from like society.
Right. And as you meet most of the characters, well, and some of the people you fight, you see that this is the society as it was supposed to be, this utopia. Which I'm not going to focus so much on the idea of utopia with this one because, again, there's a few other videos that look into that. But with the idea of objectivism is that, like, reality is. The idea of, like, Plato's cave is just non-existent. There isn't some puppet master, making this reality for you, which is ironic.
Yeah,
I feel
from what I've seen, it's very much a sense of senses.
Yeah,
what
exactly.
You can see and feel and hear, and that's what proves to you what is real. If you cannot see or hear or feel it, it's. I mean, I don't think that precludes the idea of things that you would only discover through the means of science,
right?
Like using tools that you then can use and see and feel. Obviously, it would be something that's like that would fall under objectivism because you can prove that it's there.
Yes,
through mathematics.
It's objective.
Yeah. But yeah, that's sort of the base behind it. Like, so one obviously one of the biggest things is, and a lot of people don't know this apparently, even though it's like one of the biggest facts people like to say about Ayn Rand. But Ayn Rand is an atheist.
Yep, it's often tied into. I mean, Andrew Ryan is the exact same way. His opening statement as you enter Rapture is there is no big man in the sky.
Well, it's like there's what's this? They have the things that says like no gods.
Yeah.
No kings, no gods, only man.
Yeah. Which is kind of a little side tangent, which I did kind of want to bring up is there's an irony to this. There's a lot of things that I think like it's poking holes into the idea of objectivism, but it's also like it's also enforcing it because it makes sure by the end of the game, especially that the idea of the relationship in the gamer and objectivism is all tied into one. But what's ironic about it, Andrew Ryan, who's no believe in kings or gods, I mean, his statue, which is what I want to point out. The first thing you see when you walk in is a huge statue of Andrew Ryan. Everything you see as you're going through is all these Andrew Ryan things. Like, does he, at a certain point, not view himself as a god? Or a king, even? We can even dial it down to that.
Sure. I think, that's an interesting sort of point to talk about, like, how they visually represent the world. I mean, beyond that, there's just hypocrisy in his own actions if you play the game and kind of pick up the sort of little cookie crumbs they leave, that give you some backstory. You find that he isn't the most objectivist guy in practice.
Yeah.
Like, he may believe in the idea of free markets and free economy, but when it comes time to actually put that into practice, there are several things here and there, like, he completely takes over an opponent's corporation.
Exactly.
And doesn't break it up. And this is one really big, it's a big deal in objectivism. Yeah. So it's kind of like, there's this sort of, there's an interesting conflict between how well they want to represent objectivism, but at the same time, how well they kind of don't necessarily want to tear it down. Because I think that's one of the things a lot of people like to look at Bioshock is like, it's sort of a critique or a criticism of objectivism. And I don't know that it's that effective in that means.
Well, yes, because I'm not sure how much of it is an actual critique of it. I think it's almost like a supporting argument.
Yeah.
Because as far as the in-game, I'm just going to try and get all the in-game stuff out before we start talking meta. Plasmids. Plasmids kind of became the reason that the whole thing went into chaos in the first place.
Plasmids being a gameplay element that's sort of like, you get elemental powers, like you can zap people with electricity or fire. Well, you blast them with fire.
Yeah.
And you get these through the use of what is essentially drugs.
Yeah.
And it's actually one of the better, more effective things they kind of do, and that is tying them very closely to drugs and drug use. Because that's sort of one of the biggest sort of questions is, is it worthwhile to sort of make drugs legal by and large to sort of provide this free market and free economy? Because, if it's legal, you don't have illegal markets popping up, which cause their own problems. At the same time, though, then you have these things that may be dangerous that are legal, and these drugs in the game are very dangerous because not only do they give you these elemental powers, And it's like, well, you hope people would use those responsibly, but they also drive people insane. Like, that's something that happens to them. You take them, and it's likely to cause psychosis.
Yeah, I would say
in the game.
At certain points, doesn't your character Jack start to hallucinate?
I think that's nothing to do with necessarily plasmid use, but that's why the enemies that you fight in the game are crazy, and that's why when you show up into the world too, another major kind of plot point I've sort of missed a bit is when you show up, the whole place is sort of in disarray and destruction. It's falling apart because these psychos called splicers, these guys who use the drugs, are essentially just taking over and doing, whatever the hell they want because they're insane. And no one can really stand up to them and stop them because they've got, these elemental powers.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on this like a minute or two ago, but is Andrew Ryan affecting and totally messing with the idea that reality is by controlling everything in his environment with plasmids? Because if you think about the little sisters and the big brothers and why that duo was made was to help control the control of Adam.
Yeah, that was one of the few things. I guess a few plot points I never quite connected. That was those. I know that they have something more to do with Ryan though, and the antagonist, the real antagonist of the game, Fontaine.
Fontaine, yeah.
Atlas.
Yeah. Which is also a nice little parallel because you have all the posters to Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand's book. Because all over Rapture you see posters saying, "Who is Atlas?" When the question in Atlas Shrugged is...
Well, the interesting thing about that is the way they're actually... the questions are almost foils to one another.
Yeah, exactly.
Because John Galt is obviously the character who's like Andrew Ryan, if you were to draw parallels between characters between Atlas Shrugged and Bioshock, whereas Fontaine, Atlas... I don't know characters. I haven't read Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
Would be... Is the antithesis of that. He's completely anti-objectivist. Mm-hmm. He's stands exactly for pretty much what objectivism stands against, which is altruism.
Yes.
Which is kind of you kind of were butting up against this at the beginning of the conversation. Yeah. But I wanted to kind of clarify the idea of altruism, but not altruism in the sense of just doing good things. Altruism in the sense of more like a philosophy of altruism, which is sacrifice. The best thing you can do for other people is sacrificing. The problem where objectivism sees this breaking down, though, is you can't accept sacrifices on other people's behalfs. So they create a catch-22 here in altruism of, it's great to sacrifice, but you shouldn't let people sacrifice for you. But so how would you balance these two out in any meaningful way if altruism were your go-to...
How does this...
sort of philosophy.
If I will, how does this, I guess, tie back into... Well, does it tie back into Fontaine, or does it specifically tie back into Atlas?
Sort of ties back into Atlas, because notice how Atlas...
Even though they're the same person, this is a very interesting idea.
Notice how he, when you look back into the kind of story of Bioshock, how he started taking control away from Ryan was through things that look altruistic on the surface. So he created the orphanage for the little sisters. But that's, and it looks like, we're bringing in orphans, and that's nice and kind and giving and altruistic. Except in reality, they're using them in experiments and, making them into little monsters, essentially. Yeah. And just about the least altruistic thing you could do. Right. And that's sort of a major point of objectivism is that's what happens if we don't kind of stick to objectivism. If you fall for altruism and the idea of, no, we need to sacrifice and do right for other people, well, that's where things like that come in, because people take advantage of that. You can't take advantage of objectivism the same way.
Well, and it's also because altruism is, in a way, subjective. I mean, what's good for everybody over here is not good for everybody over here. What's good for everybody with the little sisters is actually not good.
Obviously, just the very idea of sacrifice is an objective, because it's like, it's not good for me, but it may be good for that person.
Exactly.
But in the end, shouldn't we find something good for everyone?
Right. And this, I think, is actually a nice way to tie this back and to dial it out into the meta. What does this mean for your relationship as a gamer to the actual game you're playing? Because, I mean, we all know that the biggest thing about video games is it's interactive. It's why most video game movies, I feel, don't tend to work out, because you're taking out the interactiveness and...
They're often not replacing it with any kind of
substance.
Agency for the character.
Exactly.
Agency being the key word here.
Yeah.
That's agency, if you happen to know anything about game speak, is a very fancy term. It's really not that fancy at all. It's just a term that essentially refers to the fact that you have choices, you have options, and you have an effect on the world. Even if you don't necessarily do, even if you have the impression that you do, that's agency. And it's pretty much the most important element when breaking down any kind of video game is if you ever feel like when you're playing a game that you don't have agency, it's probably a bad sign.
Which is why this is so interesting.
Which is why I said probably.
Yeah.
Because as
you know where I'm about to go.
Well, there's a very, very big moment, probably the only other really good moment to me in the whole game, in the midway point, that, you lose agency, and it tells you something very big.
But
well, sort of.
It's so multifaceted. And what we're going to refer to is Andrew Ryan's death.
Yeah. A man chooses, a slave obeys.
Yeah. And he basically dies for this principle. He knows, but at a certain point I feel like he's trying to grab at you and make you break your chain, but I think he knows it's not going to happen. He's going to die for his belief because you're a slave.
It's a nice scene because there's a nice bit of ambiguity to what's going on.
Yes.
Because you're not entirely sure if, because there's 2 degrees, maybe he's just killing him, suiciding, because he realizes it's all over and he can do it this way and maybe prove a point. Or, maybe he knows that this is how he can get back at Atlas and kind of break the sort of mind spell he's got on you.
Yeah.
You're also his son.
Yeah.
So he may just want to, I can't do anything other than just let my son kill me at this point, I guess.
Yeah. And while that cutscene is very interesting in so many ways, it's what really kills me is what happens right after. Because in the cutscene, you're like, okay, I was denied the choice. While as cool as that was to watch, or as interesting it was to watch, it's what you do next. You go into the back hallway, you take the key that you pried off of his body, and you insert it. Because you think this is the best thing. You think you have a choice in what's going to happen, but what really happens is you've now given Fontaine all the power.
Yeah.
You just had everything stripped from you.
You've given all the power to the bad guy. What's weird is I don't never necessarily feel that in that, because I replayed Bioshock for this story mode this last week. I had not played it pretty much since it came out. And actually when I got to that point I felt like it had totally broken down. The idea of, I thought you had no choice at that point. Because he says, would you kindly? Just before that moment, and that's that's sort of the key words. Like, if you're forced into doing stuff.
But is the dirtiest part not that you have to physically move the joystick?
I suppose.
In order to progress the game.
I mean, yeah.
And that's where I think.
I suppose the real trick is because you think it's gonna disable because there's a self-destruct going on at the time. It's like, oh, so disable self-destruct, and really it both does that, but also then transfers all the control of the city.
But
what city there is left of it at that point.
Right. I guess
that was the only thing I didn't get. It's like, why are we fighting over control of this pile of garbage under the wall?
Right. I guess what I want to ask and to open the floor up to, and what I've been leading up to, is, are the developers in a sense making fun of you for being a slave to their will?
I don't know about making fun. I feel like that's kind of a strong sort of term to use. And also I think kind of negates the fact of just making you think about your own agency. Because I don't think there's anyone... Oddly, it's one of the few things where a lot of people will point out, certain the little sister choices that you can make. You can either... In the game, you will run into, little girls being escorted by big guys in scuba suits, souped-up scuba suits with, power weapons and crap like that. So they're really hard to take out. And once you do that, you can either rescue these little girls or kill them. And if you kill them, you get more resources, but if you rescue them, you're a good person. And you get a little bit less resources. But it's not even that much less to make it that big a deal.
And they all actually they give you a huge package at the end to kind of make up.
Yeah, and eventually you end up catching up to yourself anyway. So there's really no benefit to either way.
Yeah. Right.
So it just becomes sort of a cosmetic choice as to which ending you'd prefer to have. I hope you guys can't hear that ambulance passing outside. None of us are dying.
Yeah, we're all fine here.
We're fine. How are you?
That was a boring conversation anyways. Did you have another thing to add to that point? Okay, because I feel like you were onto something.
Sisters. Yeah, because I was kind of losing my point about the Little Sisters. So yeah, it's just this cosmetic choice, and a lot of people complained about that. The idea that sort of like, yeah, the choice doesn't mean anything. It's just whether or not you get the good guy ending or the bad guy ending. Yeah. Whereas, no one complained about the fact that you don't actually kill Andrew Ryan.
Exactly.
Like, that's taken away from you. You know, you're built up all the way you get to him is like, he's going to be the boss, and you're going to fight him, and he's going to be the end boss of the game. And then they have this cutscene, and it's not disappointing in the slightest.
No.
I think it's a show of how effective that is, and actually, even in a moment of taking agency away at a really appropriate moment, how well it can be done.
It's why I think why you do have, for multiple reasons, but I think it's why that the game developers, because clearly they started mapping this out in such a way to address the idea of objectivism and the idea of control, why you do have a last boss fight with Fontaine. Whereas the other two Bioshock games do not really have a last boss fight. They have maybe like a last kind of a hard mission, but they don't have a boss fight.
Which is also one of the things that, I don't know, in general, if we were to talk about the gameplay of Bioshock, after you kill Andrew Ryan, that kind of just really boring.
Yeah.
It's just like, here's all the standard stuff you've been doing and nothing really new or extra. You get to turn yourself into a big daddy, which doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, I feel, well, as far as the gameplay goes, I mean, I feel like it's just, let's play out the rest of this game so we can put the bow on the whole package. Where, let's just put some filler in. And I'm not saying it knocks away from the game, but I'm not saying it really helps.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it kind of does, because it's sort of like it pulls away from a very tight and effective narrative.
That's fair.
To kind of open things up to stuff you don't really need to know or spend time doing.
Yeah.
Just to kind of pad out a game so it's 10 hours long, not 6.
Right.
Because people would complain if it was 6 hours long. Well, if you paid $60 for it. I think it was only 50 back then, though.
I believe so. But does this not tie back, because now you have this parallel situation. You're against another bad guy, but you have full motion to fight him, but you do not get the option to not kill him. You're basically in the mindset and the mode to kill this character.
I suppose. I feel like that would have been more effective if you actually got that choice, though. As you say that, I was thinking like, wow, now that would have been an effective ending for that game. Instead you get to the end and you can decide whether or not to fight the end boss.
Yeah.
That would have been really effective for an ending to Bioshock. After this whole game kind of toys around with the fact that you don't have agency, it actually gives you some real agency, and like you can decide to just leave him behind.
I guess that's why I kind of have been obsessed with this question about, like, are the game developers kind of making fun of you?
I don't think it's necessarily that. It might just be more a sense of, it's 10 years ago, they maybe didn't think of it, or maybe thought of it too late, or it just isn't something that crossed their minds. Because a lot of it just comes down to is, you like to think that the people making your art are the best people ever. I'd like to think that of myself, but sometimes stuff just eludes you. You don't think about it till way after the fact.
Well, I mean, you can...
So it may have been a point that they just didn't consider even to begin with.
It kind of feels like they do draw back into Bioshock Infinite. I mean, the whole thing is revolved around this concept of choice.
Well, that one's kind of interesting. I wonder if that's not... If we want to talk about Bioshock Infinite a bit.
Yeah, we can... Because it all ties in together.
Because, Bioshock Infinite, gives you choices, but none of the choices mean anything.
Exactly.
At all. Like, they're all cosmetic choices.
Does that not take away agency?
I think it only if you feel it does.
Okay.
Because, again, agency isn't... Here's a really fun way to tie this all back together. Agency isn't really an objective metric.
Okay.
It's a subjective one. Because when you sit down, and if you're someone who's sitting down and playing a game and you feel like you have agency, no one can tell you, no, you don't, because they didn't. The choice doesn't matter. Blah 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 blah. To take Bioshock Infinite for example, you get a point later where it's like, choose the brooch. Do you want the one that's the bird, or do you want the one that's the cage? And neither makes any difference on the plot of the story, but you get to make a choice. And like if you're someone who's playing that and feels like, well, I got to make a choice. I felt like I had agency. I affected the world. Then you feel like you had agency. No one can take that away from you. It's a subjective feeling that you have playing a game. The same way that the idea of like fun. Different people have different concepts of what fun means.
Yeah.
The same thing goes with like maybe you are someone who sees that choice as not important, as nothing. And so when you see that and it happens to you, like, no, I felt like my agency was taken away from me. That's a completely acceptable and reasonable response to have, as equally as feeling like you have agency. Which makes the whole tying the idea of agency together with objectivism in Bioshock even more interesting.
Which is actually, is infinite a antithesis to the first Bioshock? Does it stand to undo everything that they had conceptualized in the first game?
I don't know. I guess it depends on... You'd have to probably break that down a little bit more. Because these are some big enough games. I mean, if you were to break them down, they only have maybe about... The same as, a movie's worth of sort of thematics and plot done into them. Actually, oddly, you probably could turn Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite into decent movies.
Yeah, probably. I can't imagine why those wouldn't work out, as opposed to a lot of other games.
Yeah, a lot of other games that have tons and tons of story. Like Bioshock, I feel like especially would be a really good one, because you could tell the story of that in an hour and a half, 45 minutes, and not really be missing too much.
Yeah. Well, especially because it does play with the whole idea of, do you have agency? Do you have choice? Do you have the freedom of choice?
Yeah.
And when you looked at like how so many gamers, I mean, think about why MMORPGs are such a big thing, because you're rewarded for the time and effort you put into something. When you play a game, you're more or less rewarded for the time and effort that you put into something. So...
Yeah, where are you going with this?
I mean... It always brings me back to this idea, like, what are the developers exactly trying to get at by pointing out to and serving on a platter that you don't have a choice? You do what we tell you to do. Is that going completely against objectivism?
I don't know. I'm beginning to wonder if the whole point wasn't kind of what I was drawing at. Is the idea of agency and objectivism being...
subjective.
Completely at odds with each other.
Yeah.
Because you can't have a sense of agency. Like, yeah, it's almost, to a degree, if you were to break it down this way, it turns Bioshock almost into an essay about other games. And about how other games try to present you with this idea of, here's the objective. Here's, the things that you're sitting on and the things that are real. But that's not what matters to you. What matters to you is the subjective. What matters to you is the things that you're feeling, the agency, that you have effect and influence on what you're doing and what you're choosing to do. There's a reason why some of the most popular games, of time and that people still play today are things like Fallout or Dragon Age or Mass Effect. Mass Effect maybe to a lesser degree, because that one doesn't have quite... You could argue that one doesn't have choices that matters much. But even then, they have choices that you can at least make and affect change in certain ways. So, yeah, I think that maybe that's part of the point of Bioshock. Isn't so much like... here's objectivism and what you want to think about it, but so much as, hey, did you ever really notice about agency and how it's not really objective?
And that's exactly why I wanted to bring Bioshock, especially so early in our story mode. Because I think, whether or not we ever bring this idea up again, I do think Bioshock is such a great essay about video games. I mean... It came in 18 years or 28 years into video gaming being a big thing. Well, longer than 28 years into being a big thing.
It's really hard to break that down.
Yeah, it's hard to know the pinpoint.
Pick Pong is mid-1970s.
Yeah.
Is that 74, 75, something like that?
So,
and that's not even necessarily considered the first thing. You could go back to those old old monitors.
Right.
I don't know what I'm saying anymore.
So to kind of bring this into our
full circle
ending act, I guess. 2 questions.
For me?
Yeah, well, it's open to you, and if anybody... God, I would love it if somebody wanted to comment on this and say, well, this is what I think. I would absolutely get floored and be excited by that. Is this game...
I think you guys are right about that yammering.
Yeah, right? Is this game trying to actually make you sympathize with Andrew Ryan? And then my next question is, as a whole... Is this this essay? Is it a form of effective storytelling? But well, yeah, go ahead.
If you're looking for answers from you, I want to answer the first one kind of first. I think that one's very much up to you as a person. I don't think they do anything to necessarily leave Andrew Ryan at any point where you couldn't sympathize or empathize with him if you felt like you wanted to.
Okay.
They don't necessarily. They paint him as an anti-hero, not a villain, really. He makes bad choices, and he doesn't necessarily follow his own philosophy, but that doesn't mean that you can't sympathize with him, understand where he's coming from, and draw some kind of something relation to him. I guess I don't think of someone to say I related to and I felt sympathy for Andrew Ryan. I'd be like, what are you doing, you weirdo? Get out of here.
Well, and the reason I pose that question is it is exactly that. I mean, it's like, yeah, some people might go, how can you sympathize with Andrew Ryan? But it's just like, well, look at your relationship as a gamer to the video game that you play. Don't you do things in self-interest? Don't you do things to reward yourself and to gain power, more or less? I mean, even looking at a concept basic as Mario, don't you go for the mushroom so you have more power?
As you break it down this way, too, it's sort of like almost any video game, to a degree, is objectivist. Because, yeah, like,
right.
you know, even if you're playing the good guy in a lot of games, you're still doing things that are probably going to benefit you. You're not likely to play, you know, give up, like, oh man, I need to give up this super secret weapon I just found to get this to happen, unless you happen to know that when you give up that weapon, 2 missions later, you get this big weapon that's even better. Well, then that's giving up the good thing is good for me then.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, it kind of doubles back on this whole thing as, you know, an essay. And is this effective, is your second question, is this an effective way of telling a story? And I would agree, I'd say yeah.
Okay.
Very much so. And I think more and more games should try and take this approach. I would say that Bioshock Infinite definitely does more of that, but certainly more about player agency and less about, you know... I don't know, I haven't played that one. I played, like, the first 20 minutes of, like, the kind of the prologue where, you know, you get your first... You're walking around the floating city in the clouds. What? Bespin.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no.
Columbia.
That's the one.
Where we went to school. Not in the clouds. Or did we? I don't know.
I don't know. We had some pretty tall buildings.
Yeah, we did have some pretty tall buildings.
Downtown Chicago.
I guess, because I agree, I do think it is effective storytelling. So why, and I guess you could apply this to any medium of art, and I do consider video games to fall into a medium of art, especially when you do look at a game like this that does delve into deeper philosophies. Like, why don't we see more of this? Why... Because movies, we see this all the time. You look at movies like...
Well, I think it might be that we probably see it in games more than we think. It's just people aren't pulling them apart as much. Because as we sat down, you know, as I said, it's like, yeah, I was kind of nonplussed by Bioshock. But as we sit down here and talk about it more, it's like, I'm kind of realizing in my own head, wow, this game was actually even more dense than I kind of even realized as we sit here talking about how objectivism relates back to agency incredibly well.
Yeah.
How these two topics tie each other together thematically incredibly effectively. To give you a lot to sort of pull from and to really, you know, grasp into. And well, when we talk about the themes in Bioshock, there's plenty to talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't say too much about Infinite because it's, you know, I remember some of the choices in that, but I don't remember enough about the game in general.
Yeah.
Because I just
that could be a beast we tackle a later time. But there's a lot of other elements going to that game.
A mode for another story.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I guess the way I want to see this more in games. I want to see, maybe they are there.
Maybe the thing is we need to be doing more story modes.
Yeah.
To encourage, you know, so that we notice, like, oh, I totally missed this from this game.
Yeah.
Or I totally missed this from this game. I'm sure that another one as something is like, yeah, there are a couple games that pop into my mind. It's like, yeah, I'm sure you could like pick up Deus Ex.
Yeah.
Or the last one too, and you probably find plenty to talk about in those games. I guess the issue comes down to is I haven't really seen a whole lot of things that games have done really well outside of kind of tackling agency and other, you know, kind of that sort of stuff. It would be nice to see games tackle some thematics with some actual weight.
Yeah.
You know, like politics or like, you know, some other things that might, I don't know. I'm not even coming up with examples. I'm just
I mean politics is huge. I mean, you play just as a quick example, Inquisition. Huge with politics when you get to certain aspects of the game.
Sure, but I mean more like modern politics. Because even then, like, you look at it, if you look at any fantasy thing, there's, you know, if it's something you can do with any fantasy thing ever. Like, you know, you can look at Game of Thrones and go, well, this is just like the politics now. You can look at, you know, the High Sparrow and their stuff. It's like, well, that's just like our politics now with Bernie Sanders. It's like, it's not hard to draw parallels between two stories because, you know, that's just essentially what we're just in our own modern story that's happening right now around us. It's more a sense of, like, actually getting in there and saying, being clear that you're saying something about it and not just throwing something in there to be like, hey, maybe you can pull some things to kind of relate to. Because I feel like that's kind of how they're more used. It's like, you can kind of relate to this. This is something that you'll recognize. Because, it's one of those things where when people don't really step out and kind of get clear about things sometimes, I feel like it leads to, a situation where a Republican and a Democrat can both look at the same piece of art and think it condemns the other like completely and implicitly.
Right.
When really that's really appropriate when you look at it and go, no, this condemns both of us equally and implicitly.
Right.
Because you can see so many art, like you can see it in so many things. Like you'll look at someone who's Republican, they'll go look at someone who's, this is totally promoting or like totally tears apart all those democratic values, and then you'll get at the exact same thing from the other side about the exact same pieces of media. And it's just not a sense of necessarily the author writing about, here's what I had a strong case to make. It's just I wanted to include these so you have to relate to or to have story points.
Which, and to tie it back, why I do think Bioshock is so effective is they, I believe, set out to say a very specific thing. And that's what I greatly enjoyed about it. And, well, say what you will about the second game. I might actually want to look deeper into that because I never really thought about it before.
Haven't played it?
Yeah, I played it once. It was whatever. But Infinite too. But it does make me want to go back into other games. And I'm like, am I looking at this too much on the surface? And I think that's what we need to do. I mean, it's why we're doing these story modes.
That's what story mode's here to do. Story mode is here to do, man.
Story mode, the subset of story mode.
To get under the layers of that onion, like Shrek.
Right. Oh God.
And as we ramble on and get further and further away from our topic of conversation, any closing thoughts, Ben?
Just that I'd like to see, or I'd like to see more of this and explore more of this in our further story modes because I think that they are out there. I think there are plenty of games, and I think there are plenty of games that just don't. But I think there are plenty of games that have some of these clear messages that I don't think people are quite seeing on the surface because we are very... the human condition is interesting.
Yeah, well, we're, to bring up how we brought up, we're film students.
Yeah.
But it's like, when you go to... At least when you're a writer or, you spend time creating your own stuff, it primes you to kind of be looking for these things in the first place a little bit more. That may be part of it. Is, when you sit down and you want to play a game, I kind of just don't necessarily want to be so mentally engaged. Maybe that's not my thing, and that's kind of part of it. Is, because I think that's a part of what effective, really good entertainment/art does is, one person can sit down and pull a lot of themes and stuff from it, but another person can sit down and just have fun. They don't have to sit down and all those things kind of maybe not necessarily just they ignore them, but they kind of just add to the effect of this is fun. They build onto the fun, whereas if you start breaking down the fun, you can start saying, oh, look at these themes they got here. Look at what Andrew Ryan's representing. Look at what Fontaine's sitting there doing. Look at that doctor chick that we didn't even talk about once in the entire thing, who's a huge main character.
Yeah.
Who we probably could do a lot of thematic unpacking of.
The reason I kind of didn't want to touch upon her was there was a lot going on with her, especially when you do start delving into the second game.
Honestly, she might, if you were to draw anything, she might be the one to most effectively stand as a as an argument to objectivism.
Yes, because she's actually true to it.
No, because she's actually almost not.
Not to objectivism. I mean, true to being against it.
Yes.
As opposed to Atlas.
Not necessarily objectivism as it stands. Like she's like, I'm anti-objectivist, but no, she's certainly very charitable.
Yes.
She, as a character, you would say that she would not be an objectivist person.
Yes.
In her values and her goals. And yet, really, that's an interesting point because it kind of lets you decide for yourself whether or not how effective altruism or objectivism is, because you can go the full objectivism route, and that gets you the evil ending essentially. Mm-hmm. But if you go sort of the altruistic route, even though you may know in the advance that you get just as much from it, because she's the one who tasks you with saving the little girls, and if you kill them, she hates you. Mm-hmm. And if you go the more altruistic route, you get the good guy ending. Mm-hmm. Maybe it would have been a little bit more interesting to see, because I think that might be the biggest case for them arguing sort of counter that objectivism doesn't work. I think that you could probably argue to a degree that it doesn't anyway, just by the story behind Rapture and the idea that when you break down objectivism, if sort of let's say we're going to make an objectivist society, if even sort of one person decides that they're not going to participate in the objectivist society, it breaks down.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to be implicitly agreeing to be doing objectivist things all the time.
Right. And
if anyone decides at any point, well, I'm straying from objectivism, that kind of defeats it.
I think that was all great. Guys, thank you so much for listening to us yammer.
We got some points in there.
No,
I got a 3-pointer there at the end.
Yeah.
The buzzer.
Yeah, you were half-court in that one. So...
That one's for you, Bert. Our basketball fan.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for sitting in on this episode of Story Mode. We're very excited to keep bringing you more. And if you have any more things you want to add to this, to reflect on, or even challenge us on, please, we're open to the comments.
Yeah, take us to the task tab to come back and talk more about Bioshock. Or if you have any games that you're like, man, I'd like to see these guys yammer on about this game.
Yeah,
or listen to, I guess.
Yeah. Even if you want us to go into the politics of Mario, if you want it, we'll do it.
Man, all right, next time on Story Mode, the politics of Mario.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. Till next time.